So the media's representation of minority groups is biased and inflammatory. So, some of the examples. This year, after the tragic murder of a woman in London by a man suffering from a psychiatric disorder, The Sun published its newspaper the next day, claiming it had been done by a Muslim without any evidence to be as such. And you have the newspaper's constant skewing of statistics regarding immigration of various Polish and Romani groups to inspire fear and such. You also have the constant, what's the word? I completely forgotten. Well, you have Nigel Farage's remarks on immigration and such, which is Mandy probably also talked about UKIP quite a bit. So yeah, that's pretty much.
So thank you, Kieran. So the statement that the media's representation of minority groups is biased and inflammatory. Mandy, what about other minority groups? Obviously, the focus very much at the moment on immigration and people coming in from outside this country. What about minority groups within this country?
The press, again, have a responsibility to the readership, I believe, to report facts, to give information, and to educate, I suppose, in a way, so that we can then make informed choices and decisions. What seems to happen, though, is that there is so much competition in terms of, or read this newspaper, no, read this newspaper, that from quite some time ago, it became the fashion to start out-headlining each other in some sensationalist way that gets people to want to buy that newspaper and read it because we love to see, a bit of shock or a bit of titillation or a bit of drama across the breakfast table. And so as a result of that, part of this problem is again down to us. Part of this problem is us wanting to read some of these sensational stories because the press will keep reporting stuff that makes us want to buy it. Now, it's a double-edged sword because I often speak to people on the doorstep who talk about immigration and repeat things to me that they've read in the Daily Mail, for example, or in The Sun. And a recent readership survey of the national press actually discovered that the majority of citizens, about 31% of people in the UK, the people that were surveyed believe that 31% of the people in the UK are immigrants. It's only 13%. So there's a massive difference between what we believe, because of what we're reading in the press, and that 24% of the entire British population are Muslims. And actually it's only 5%. So there's a real disparity between what we're being fed and led to believe in the press and what's actually the truth. And then, of course, there's the language that's used. Some research around the use of the word Muslim found that, within the press, the word Muslim often, the majority of the time, had phrases like extremist, zealot, cretin, real kind of extreme language behind it, as opposed to other religions, for example. They talk, when crime was committed, about a Muslim thug. And yet they wouldn't think to report about a Christian thug or a Catholic thug. It's always a Muslim thug. So yes, I do think that it's inflammatory, and I do think minority groups in this country are definitely suffering from it.
If I could just pick up on that, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
It's interesting, I agree, the analysis of language is really interesting. Of course, part of the problem is that there isn't a big problem with the extremist fundamentalist Hindus. And again, it's inconvenient truth, isn't it, unfortunately, that we have a very difficult time in the media trying to work out. You used the example of the beheading in London, where the immediate snap thing in the papers was to call Muslim.
A Muslim convert.
Yes, we have a very difficult time really working out what is a real act of jihad, which is a genuine problem facing us in our society. There is such a thing as ISIS out there beheading innocent people, and it would be wrong to ignore it. It would be wrong to underplay it. But there are also people out there who are trying to exploit the fear that creates and do things that appear to be linked to this terrifying movement, but actually not. And it's very, very difficult to get to the truth of those things. And sometimes, I mean, I actually think that that son one wasn't one of the worst cases I've ever seen. I think, in a sense, it was a mistake. It was wrong. But I can understand how that mistake was made. There have been other ones which have been far worse because it is literally a deliberate distortion of the facts. It's a very difficult thing for journalists working under tight deadlines, under, you know, within 24 hours you've got to work out what's going on in the world today and have an accurate version of it out there. And some of this stuff's really confusing. So I think that's part of the reason why you get this. But also, just to move away from religion for a moment, I had an example from when I was working at the Kent Messenger. I had an editor a few years ago who used to talk to us about the police crime reports we'd get in. They'd be doing witness appeals, and you'd be told that the police were seeking someone who was, 18, 6'2", wearing jeans in connection with an attack. And you get loads of these things as a journalist. And we would write, as part of that, the race of the person. The police would supply you with the race. This person is white, 6'2", wearing jeans. This person is black. And our editor came to the newsroom one day and said, look, I don't think we need to say white anymore. White's the default. Only put the race in if they're not white. And of course, the net effect of that is that the only times you ever read race in relation to crime on the paper would be, oh, that's a black person doing it again. Oh, that's a Muslim person doing it again. That's an Asian person doing it again. White people never seem to commit crimes in this area. It's all black race. And we fought against that. Myself and one of my colleagues raised that as an ethical issue and managed to get him to change his mind. But the use of language, you mentioned there, it can be a very subtle thing. It's not all about big headlines. And actually that can be more powerful sometimes. That kind of really kind of subtle, almost subliminal message about race can actually be more powerful.